Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'd like to show you my transformation of my front garden. I'm basically putting in some new beds. I have done a video about the killing of the grass here, but that's not going to be out till next year because I'm doing a long-term video where I'm going to show you follow-ups throughout the video. So you'll be able to find that later on. But basically I put down this landscaping fabric to kill off any of the grass. It's worked particularly well on the grass and the perennial weeds. I can show you down here. It's all pretty much gone. You can see there's a tiny bit of moss left, but it's basically breaking down into compost, and there's things like worms starting to appear, which I really didn't have many worms at all in my soil before. So it's worked quite well. All the grass should be dead, all the perennial weeds should be dead. This will be ready for digging over. Moss tends to be very difficult to be broken down by organisms or fungi. It's just really resistant to rot, so that will take quite a while to rot down. But what I'll probably do is just dig that into the soil. That will just break down over several years. Any grass roots that are there, or any perennial roots that are still in the soil, they'll be completely dead now. They'll just slowly break down over time. So I'm just going to break them up with a rotavator and allow them to rot down. So it might look a bit strange at first, but it should break down nicely. And when it comes to the soil itself, the soil here is absolutely atrocious. I can show you here, there's basically no organic matter. It's also really dry. It's a dry, sandy loam soil, and it just doesn't hold any moisture, and it's just like dust. You can see there, it's just really poor soil. So I need to do an awful lot to improve this soil. Now I have improved the soil on these semicircular beds here, which I've planted up, and I've kept mulching that with grass clippings, and I've now put wood chips. That's really helped to increase the organic matter. The soil there is quite nice. I can show you a little close-up of that now. And it also holds the moisture quite well. I haven't watered this in a few weeks, and it's been quite dry, but we had some rain last week, and that was just enough to dampen it down, and it's held the water quite nicely, whereas the soil over there, as you can see, was particularly dry. This soil, with it being mulched and with having more organic matter, you can see it's nice and damp. There's also lots of organisms in there, little microbes, and you can see a few worms possibly on the camera. But you can see the soil, it's not much darker colour, it's still nice and loose, but it does have a lot of organic matter in it, so it holds the moisture, holds the nutrients, and the plant's growing much better for it. You can see the colour of the leaves in these plants, really dark green, because there's a lot more nutrients in this soil. So I wanted to plant this up last winter. I didn't get the chance, I was too busy working on the house. I also wanted to then plant this up in spring, but I just can't get any cheap compost here. Basically compost in small bags is actually cheaper than compost in bulk bags. This bulk bag here actually cost me 4 times as much as it would cost me in Edinburgh. So I've spent a small fortune on these 2 bags, but at least I don't have all that plastic waste. And I find this kind of compost is a little bit better because a lot of the smaller bags of compost in the UK are peat based, and you don't want to be using peat if you can help it. And this is naturally broken down materials from food waste or garden refuse, so it's got a lot more life in it. It doesn't have any microorganisms like worms or invertebrates, but it does have a lot of bacteria and fungus which will help enrich the soil. So that's why I've been a bit late in doing this. I would have ideally wanted to get the whole growing season, but I've missed it now. It's middle of July, so I'll be planting this up. I was going to put trees at the front. Unfortunately, the supplier didn't manage to supply them at the size I'd asked for, so I'll have to wait till autumn and plant them then. But the rest of the bed I'm going to be planting up, I've got several rose shrubs. I only lost one last winter from the frost, so they'll be going in this bed. They should look nice. And then I'll also be planting it up with bedding plants. Now it is quite late in the year. I would have loved to get some summer bedding in. If I plant summer bedding now, it might grow great for a month, but then by September the cold weather comes, the frosts arrive, and they'll just go over. So I'll see if I can get some autumn bedding now. I'll put that in. It should still grow fine over summer, but at least it will last through to autumn and into winter. If I can't get autumn bedding soon, then you won't see this planted up in this video. I'll show you an update video later on, and I'll plant it up with autumn bedding in the autumn. Now when it comes to the beds, I recently put in a new path, so that has slightly destroyed the design, unfortunately, because I didn't realise I was going to go for quite such a wide path. But basically this bed here needs to be narrowed slightly. I don't have space. Basically once I planted up this bed, I won't be able to get out of my car without walking on the flower bed. So that will be narrowed by 1 foot or 2, just to give me space to walk alongside the car. This bed here, this is going to be exactly the size as you see it now. But unfortunately, I had positioned this Cordyline to be right in the centre of the bed. But it's now, because this path is wider than it was originally, it's now slightly to the right of the bed. So I'm a little annoyed that won't look perfect, but there's nothing I can do about that now really. I could try transplanting it, but I feel like it's really getting its roots down nice. I don't want to disturb it, so I'll probably leave this. I'll maybe regret this decision in a few years time when it gets so big it starts encroaching on the path, but that's the only thing that's a bit annoying about the design. Everything else will be slightly offset from that instead of being a nice line like I had originally wanted. So I'm just going to start working now. I'm going to remove all the old bark, remove the landscaping fabric. I'm going to dig in lots and lots of compost, as much as I have available. I would have liked a lot more compost, but as I said, it's very expensive here. Really enrich the soil. Dig it as deep as I can, just being careful not to disturb my new concrete where I've cemented in these tiles. Now the tiles do look excessively high, but because when I dig over the beds it will loosen the soil will raise in height, and I'm wanting to add a lot of compost to the beds, so that will also raise the height as well. So in the end these tiles won't look excessively high, especially in a few years when I finally get a decent supply of compost and I can mulch it with a nice thick layer of compost and enrich the soil further. Then the soil level will look fine, and this will actually be a slightly sunken path. At the moment it's a raised path, raised by about 5 centimeters above the ground height, maybe 10 centimeters in one or two places. But in the long term this will be a slightly sunken path. So as I say, it looks a bit strange now, but in the future this should look quite good. So I'll get going now, and I'll see you once I've dug over the site. So it's now about 3 weeks later. Now unfortunately I wasn't actually able to get any summer bedding plants. It's a bit late in the year for that, and I couldn't get any autumn bedding plants because it's not quite late enough for the autumn bedding plants. But I have planted up the beds anyway. I'll just give you a run through of what I planted up. You'll probably also see the rest of my summer plants in the background. The front's looking quite good. This has been planted up earlier. My giant sunflowers, I've got my Senetti bananas that grew from seed, and quite a large castor oil plant. These I'm actually going to do an update video on probably in about 2 or 3 weeks time, once they're all in full bloom. I've got things like lilies here and gladioli, which are only just starting to come into bloom. So I'll give you an update on them towards the end of summer, but I'm quite looking forward to how they're going to look. But the focus on this second half of the video will be about the beds I've just planted up. So I showed you in the first half of the video that I was going to leave a strip here so I could walk along the edge. That's what this is here. This is just the compacted soil that was underneath that black fabric. I haven't dug it over or anything. What I will probably do is I will dig this out. I'll put some wooden edging along the edge of this bed, and then I'll probably just put a load of concrete and cast it just like the driveway here. Now I will have to redo the driveway at some point. You can see it's actually quite uneven and there's loads of cracks in it. I don't know how old the drive is, but basically it's falling apart, and I'm going to have to redo that at some point. But just for now, for the next 5 years or so, I'm just going to cast a flat bit on the edge just to extend the drive slightly further so I can actually get out my car and not have to walk in the flower bed. So that's what's going to happen there in the future. On the other side, where I was worried that my Cordyline was not going to be quite in the middle, it's actually worked out okay. The reason being, although the edge of the bed is that bit where the dirt is down there, the way I've mounded it up, it looks like the edge of the bed is just a bit further in. You can maybe see it a bit better here. It doesn't seem to show as well in the cameras, it does in real life, but the edge of the bed is technically there, but it looks like the edge is here because of where the edge of the mulch suddenly dips down on. And what that means is when I do look at this bed from the edge here, the Cordyline fortunately is in the middle, and so it does actually line up quite nice. So as I said before, I couldn't get the bedding I wanted, so I basically filled this with the mixture of plants headline around the place and some of the perennials that I was going to put in here anyway. So at the entrance here there was supposed to be a couple of laburnum trees. I'll be planting them this winter. I had some leftover castor oil plants, so I planted them there for now. These castor oil plants should grow up to about 2 meters if I'm lucky, depends when the first frosts come, but then they'll get killed by the frost, and I'll replace them with the laburnum trees come autumn time. Now coming to the main beds, what I've done is I had quite a few geraniums. I was basically going to build a green wall with geraniums, never got around to it this summer, so I had a lot of spare geraniums, so I've just dotted them along the beds. That's just to give a bit of colour. There's still loads of space though, so come a couple of weeks probably when the autumn bedding comes in, I'm going to fill up all the spaces with autumn bedding so that when the summer bedding goes, such as the geraniums and also the cosmos plants here, they'll still have some colour in this bed. I would like to, even though winter is normally no colour here in Scotland, I would like to have some colour in the garden, a bit of greenery at least. So at the front I've got my 2 Senettis. They finish flowering in spring. or late spring, early summer. I cut them back down to the ground. They've resprouted really nicely and they're starting to flower again. These will be covered in flower in autumn, so I'll probably do another update on these. These will look stunning. These do quite well with cold temperatures, but they aren't frost hardy, so I'll have to be careful when we do start getting the frosts. And because of that, this is actually the only plant that I put inside its pot, so come the end of the season I can lift it straight out of the ground and give it shelter in the greenhouse over winter so it will survive the frost. And there's two of them. They used to be at the front door. They're now growing nicely in this bed. They're just about to come into flower. And then going forwards, I've got the rose shrubs, which are going to be a permanent addition to the bed. So I've got quite a few different types. They've all got their labels on, but it might be a bit hard for me to find the labels. They're not all in flower at the moment, so I'll probably do an update on my summer bedding plants and all the other flowers later in the year, so I can show you these in flower. But these are, I think this one is Dutch Gold, a nice big yellow fragrant rose. One over here, I think this is the one called Fragrant Cloud, and that's another really strongly fragrant rose. All the roses I chose because they're repeat flowering, so they should have flowers constantly from the early summer right through to the frost. They're highly fragrant, so I'm going to get a great scent as I walk up to the door, and they're all disease resistant. You'll notice most of them have almost no black spot or any kind of fungal diseases, a little bit of black spot on some of them. And they're mostly nice and resistant, healthy growing roses. I've grown a lot of roses in the past, a lot of the old kind of traditional ones. They look great, they have nice flowers, but unless you're constantly spraying them with pesticide and fungicide, you're just going to get covered in pests the whole time and fungus. So that's why I've gone for these. I don't like spraying fungicide and everything, and I want to have nice looking roses that aren't always sickly. So all the ones I have chosen, they're very resistant to disease. You can see this one though is covered in aphids at the moment at the back. There's a lot of hoverflies around at this time of year, so these aphids will be soon dealt with, and if they're not, I'll just wash them off with water. Aphids on roses normally isn't a big issue. You can just wash it off with a hose and that normally deals with it. So going along, we've got the cosmos. I got these in the garden centre, got 6 of them, which is basically as much as I could afford, because I think they're about £5 each. These will flower really nice right through to the first frosts, give a bit of height as well. These should grow maybe twice as high as this. If the autumn is warm, we get an early frost, they won't grow much bigger, but these normally do quite well even with cooler temperatures, as long as the frost doesn't hit them. And this one's quite nice. It's got very large pink flowers. As long as I keep deadheading it and looking after it, it should keep flowering well. This one is particularly nice looking, this one here, really nice big pink flowers in that bright yellow centre. So these will give a good display until autumn. Coming along, I've got another rose. This rose is called Deep Secret, one of my favourite roses. It's got really deep dark colour to the rose. When it first comes through, it's almost black, then it goes to the really deep red, and then it just kind of finishes. This one has a fantastic scent, and it's probably one of the taller out of all the roses I have, one of the taller ones. So that should be flowering soon again. All these roses were flowering in early summer. I've deadheaded them all, and they're all about to give a second flush. On the left here, I should have had another Deep Secret rose, but it got killed in the very hard frost we had over last winter. We basically had -15 just a couple of weeks after these roses arrived bare root, and although I planted them up into pots, the shock was too much because the roses were actually from Somerset, so they were already starting to sprout and coming into growth, and I'm up here in North Scotland. It's gone from Somerset, mild conditions in the southwest of England, to hard frost. So I lost one rose. The other ones are badly damaged, but they've recovered. So I planted this up one of my dahlias. This one didn't do well, unfortunately. Basically, it didn't have enough light. The stems all flopped over, and it's a bit of a straggly mess. It should be a lot taller than this, and it should be looking a lot healthier. But I was quite late putting it in the ground. It's basically an enormous plant, huge tubers, and it's been pot bound all summer, so it's not done well. But now it's in the ground, the leaves are looking a nice rich green colour again, and the new growth, as you can see, is nice and short, it's not looking leggy. You can see the old growth, huge amount of gap between the nodes on it, so it's a very leggy growth. But you can see the leaves here really crammed up close together, so that's doing much better. It's not showing signs of flowering yet. Normally by this time of year I'd expect some flowers, just a few coming through, or at least some buds forming, but we'll see. Hopefully it'll flower before the frosts come, but it is a bit touch and go. I might not be lucky this year and get any flowers on that. And then coming forwards, we've got one of my favourite roses. There's two actually. I basically kind of matched them, so they're symmetrical either side. This is the slightly larger one out of the two of them, and this is called Arthur Bell. It's a floribunda rose, so it flowers quite readily, replete flowering as well. You can see, being a floribunda rose, it quite often has bunches of flowers. You can see there's about 3 or 4 buds there. And this Arthur Bell rose, as well as being free flowering, it's very fragrant. A lot of the floribunda roses aren't quite as fragrant as the hybrid tea roses, but this one's got a fantastic scent. The flowers are quite nice as well. When they first come through the buds, they're slightly red tinged to the outside of the buds, and then as they open, it's a very dark, deep yellow colour. And then as time goes on, it gets paler and paler, and it's almost white when the flower finally finishes. So that's quite nice, because the colour of the flower changes as the flower matures. So it's always slightly different colours of flower on an individual plant at any one time. Also, what I love about the Arthur Bell rose is its leaves are just so glossy. You can see, especially these new ones, it looks like I've polished them or put leaf shine on, but that's just naturally how they look. Really shiny leaf, really healthy looking. And even the older leaves tend to keep some of that shininess. You can see there, it's really glossy, nice shiny leaves. That's just a nice feature as well. They just look like such healthy plants. And Arthur Bell almost never has any issues when it comes to disease. This is a smaller one I've had for several years. Same again, really glossy leaves, barely ever gets any disease problems. If it's a very damp summer, I've occasionally seen a bit of black spot on it, but generally this is absolutely solid, never seems to have any fungal problems. Then coming forward, we've got a Cordyline here. That's one I mentioned before, wasn't quite in the middle. I'll put a photo up now, hopefully you can see the difference. It has grown a lot. It hasn't grown a lot in height, but it's got much bigger leaves now. You can see these leaves coming out here are quite a bit thicker, or should I say wider, than the ones down the bottom there. And there's definitely a bit of a trunk starting to appear. You can't actually see the bare trunk because it's covered in leaves, but there's definitely a bit of width starting to appear to the plant. That'll continue to thicken up, and then probably next summer we'll get a bit of height starting on this plant. Hasn't grown a lot of height yet, but my idea is to have this covered in leaves and really shoot up quickly, try and get like a palm tree kind of effect with it. I'll see how quickly it grows. Should be a good location for it. The only issue is if we do have a hard winter, I might have to give this a little bit of protection. It'll be fine at the root level, but if I want to get a palm tree effect, I need to protect that stem. -10, anything below -10, and then I'll start thinking about protecting it, but otherwise I'll leave it outside without any protection and it should do just fine. And then on the left again, we've got another castor oil plant that I planted as well, just to fill that in. I'm not entirely sure what plant I'm going to go for here. There's a nice plant called Abutilon Suntense, which is like a, doesn't look like a normal Abutilon. It has nice pale blue flowers. It's quite hard to find in the UK, so I've not been able to get it yet. And also, it's probably not quite hardy enough for my area. -10 will be fine, but if we have a winter like last winter, it'll probably be killed. So that's something I'm looking into. I might plant there next summer, but for now, just put this in here to fill it up. This other one's been in the ground for about a month and a half. The other one's only been in the ground for 2 weeks or so, 3 weeks. And you can see the size of the leaves, much bigger. For example, I'm 6'4", 6'5". That's my hand size next to these. Put my hand size next to these ones. You can see quite a difference, massive, especially if you give it enough space and light. So hopefully these other ones might get to that size by the end of summer. It's probably not likely. Here in Scotland, once you get to August, the light levels get reduced, the temperatures start to drop. Normally fine to the middle of August, but I find the last week or two of August is quite hit and miss. You could have a heat wave, it could be nice and warm in the 20 degrees range, or it could be cold, below 10 degrees, even frost at night. So it can be quite variable at this time of year. Hopefully I'll be lucky and the frost will stay at bay and I'll get this growing quite nicely and get some height on these castor oil plants. So that's all for this video. I'm quite happy with the way the path's gone. I've also mulched the beds with mulch to try and keep the weeds down. Also, because I couldn't afford lots of compost, this will rot down over time and it will increase the organic matter in the soil and just improve the soil further. So the soil level might rise slightly if I get some more compost and get some more mulch, but you can see now how the path isn't really like a raised path, it's more of a sunken path, especially if I see low down. You can hopefully see that. It's more of a sunken path now, whereas before it was definitely more of a raised path, so I think that's looking a lot nicer. I did make a slight mistake on one tile just up there, which unfortunately got set before I could then fix it, so it's slightly out of place, but all the other tiles are looking quite nice. I also had the issue that when I did make this, they changed type of tile. I couldn't buy those tiles again, so I had a few left at the end that I needed to do. These tiles are in fact thicker. You can see this is where it transitions. The new tiles are slightly thicker and they're quite a lot longer as well. But luckily the stone is the same colour, so they matched them fine. So that's all for this update. I'll give you guys an update of this bed probably within another update, which will basically be the update of the whole front garden, all my summer bedding plants. I'm looking forward to seeing how these sunflowers do. Certainly this one on the right has the most potential. It's really starting to get big now. Hasn't started flowering yet, so that could become huge. The ones on the left, they are starting to flower, so they won't get much taller. And I'm looking forward to see how big the Senetti ventricosum bananas get, and also looking at more of these lilies and gladioli. There'll be a nice display of colour, and we'll see how they do.